And welcome into another off-season edition of Spits and Suds. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting Spits and Suds. Truly appreciate it. I'm Gavin Spittle of 1053 The Fan. Really interesting program today. If you enjoy following, and who doesn't if you're a Dallas Stars fan, with the evolution of Mavrik, Bourque, and others coming up through the system, Jason Robertson, Jake Ottinger, we love to get Texas updates, and nobody knows the Texas Stars better than our Spits and Suds correspondent from the Austin area. It's Stephen Meserve of 100 Degree Hockey, and of course co-authored the book which tells the stories of the Texas Stars, the evolution of the Dallas Stars, players in between, along with co-author Sean Shapiro. It's Stephen Meserve. How are you, buddy?
Doing great. We are truly living through 100-degree hockey times right now. It'd be great if we were on the ice, though. Not far away, though. It definitely is, but great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking the other day, talking, and one of the things that we, came up, it was with Al Montoya, who does such a great job with community affairs now, as far as getting into the Latin community. And before we get started on some of the Stars prospects, Al and I were kind of going back in memory lane because I covered the Houston Aeros, and Al was a goaltender for San Antonio for a number of years. So we talked about the Cedar Park, San Antonio, Houston rivalry. How much do you miss it?
It was so wonderful to have those three teams. And if you add in even the Oklahoma City Barons,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
little bit further of a ride.
Yep.
But among those three teams, you had so many opportunities for the old AHL 3-3. And as much as you hate it in terms of like the body just being dead by Sunday, you could get a lot of really good hockey close. I got chances to go down to San Antonio. You could do road trips.
Yeah.
You could see that experience in that barn. And, say what you will about the fact that the team is not there anymore, it had nothing to do with their attendance. It was a well-attended barn. They knew how to pack that place, especially on the weekends. They do promotions with the military community. They do cross promotions with the San Antonio Spurs. That was a fun place to see a hockey game, and it was a really tough time when they left in the middle of the pandemic without even getting a chance to say goodbye. So definitely rooting for San Antonio hockey. If that ever happens again, I know a lot of Cedar Park fans and certainly players would be happy because it's just a 90-minute road trip.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like dreamland scenario. Houston gets a team and makes their AHL franchise San Antonio.
It would be a lot of fun to have that connection again because it
Yeah.
was such a great rivalry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was so cool hearing the stories from Al and how much he enjoyed playing down there for the Rampage. Okay, as we head into training camp, I was thinking, hey, let's do a program on some of the other Dallas Stars that get mentioned every once in a while within the organization, but can they make an impact, and how did they fare in Texas? Some for better or some for worse. Let's start with the biggest name, and we kind of all thought that going into this year, I don't want to say it was a guarantee, but one of the top six would be Lian Bichsel. And it appears as though, unless there is a few injuries, that he will start the year in Texas. When Lian Bichsel returned, Stephen, what kind of development did you see from playing overseas to when he came back in Texas and played in the AHL playoffs?
The interesting thing to remember about Lian Bichsel is I looked at it today. I couldn't believe it when I saw the numbers. He played a total of 21 games in North America last year.
Wow.
21. And that was 5 of those were the playoff games at the end of the season. So you got to think about Texas and Dallas really wanted him to come over here and play North American hockey close to where they could monitor him, develop him, help him with his growth into the next stage of the game. And just remember, first of all, that he only played 16 games before he went over back to Europe and played in Sweden with Rogla, and that's something to remember. I think personally that when he came back, he just had a confidence. You know, it's hard to quantify for me, but I think he owned the ice more. He was more confident in his skills. Not to say that he wasn't at the beginning, but that deep run in the playoffs with Rogla, going all the way to the championship series, he really owned his ice. He knew how to put his edge on without going overboard. And I think that no matter what level of development though he came back with after that, I think the plan was always for him to play just a little bit to start the season in Cedar Park. And it's a cliche at this point with Scott White, the GM of the Texas Stars and AGM of Dallas. He always says the players have to make us make the tough decisions. And so they're going to put Bichsel in a situation where he has the ability to make his move, make a mark, and force their hand to put him in Dallas. I think we could be seeing something where in November, December, he's leaving the Texas Stars again, but this time instead of going to Sweden, he's going to the Metroplex.
The Stars made an off-season signing, actually two, because Petrovic is back on a 2-year, two-way deal, and they also brought in Capobianco, who has about 75 games in the NHL. Do you foresee one of them? I know Petrovic did pair with Bichsel at times. Do you foresee an NHL vet getting with Bichsel, or do you think the Stars organization would rather put him with somebody else so that he can kind of take control?
I think honestly, if you were to pick between Petrovic and Capobianco, I was thinking about this earlier, and it really depends on what kind of player you want Bichsel to be. You look at Petrovic, and he's a known quantity. He is a defensive defenseman. He's going to be solid in his own zone. He'll contribute a little bit in offensive zone, but that's not his forte at this point in his career. Capobianco won the AHL Defenseman of the Year last year, which, similar to the Norris Trophy in the NHL, is generally awarded to the player who scores a lot of points on the offensive side, in addition to being good on the defensive side. But it's not, awarded based on how many shot blocks they give. That will say that much. So if you want Bichsel to develop into an offensive talent, I think you pair him with Petrovic because he can kind of have that offensive defensive pairing. If you think Bichsel is more of your shutdown guy who's going to, stay at home and those sorts of things, you could pair him with Capobianco, and Capobianco gets to go do those offensive things. And I think that's an interesting, and it's going to be perhaps a telling way that they do the pairings to start the season of how they set that pairing up. Now, the other thing to remember too is those aren't the only two options, as you mentioned. There are
Right.
other guys down the line who you could potentially pair with, but those are two really interesting possibilities, and especially given the height and the ceiling that they have for Bichsel, I think you're going to probably see one of those two be the person.
Sometimes when you hear a name for a few years, Steven, and then you look him up and you're doing prep like this program, I had to take a step back because at first heard a lot about Christian Kyrou on the blue line and like, okay, this is one of the Stars' top prospects. And a lot of people would ask like, hey, how's Kyrou doing? How's Kyrou doing? And then this year passed, and then you look at, he's only 20 years old. It's pretty amazing. So where does he fit in?
I think part of the challenge, you get challenges when you're in the AHL where your expectations are raised because of something beyond your control. First round draft picks, your name is mentioned a lot. You get a lot of pub, right? And so you end up, people feel like, oh God, he's been here forever. He should be in the NHL by now. Why isn't he developing? Whatever it might be. Kyrou's not a first round draft pick. He's a second round draft pick, but he happens to have a rather famous brother who has been a successful NHLer for a number of years. And so that also adds to the level of expectation around his name. Last year, though, he was a rookie. Like it doesn't feel like it, but
Right.
he was a rookie. And I think one of the interesting things about him is I think he came into his own in the playoffs. He had 23 points throughout the course of the season, playing in most games. He played about just under 60 games for Texas. But then he had a point a game in the playoffs. He had 7 points in 7 games. He had a couple of really big offensive explosion games where it looked like he had really figured out the way to turn his skills and his breakout ability and skating into points. And that's the type of player that he is. He wants to be an offensive defenseman, and that's the way that he's been used. And the fact that he figured it out at that, most difficult time of year to be playing hockey in the playoffs, that tells me that I think this could be a big year for him. It's still going to take a lot for him to break into the NHL because Dallas has a really solid back end on the blue line. But this year is a pivotal year for him, that sophomore season in the AHL. And you got to remember, too, it just takes longer for defensemen oftentimes. You
Yeah.
look at Thomas Harley, a very great prospect for a number of years for Dallas. They had to basically take apart and put back together his defensive game in Texas in
Right.
order to get him to where he is right now, and being such a well-respected player on the blue line for Dallas. So these things take time. It's not always overnight.
Yeah, you mentioned Thomas Harley, and another one to throw out at the forward position when Mavrik Bourque first joined the AHL. Took him,
Yeah.
the second half of his first year, he was certainly much better, and then we saw the dominance last year. But that first half year heading into the AHL All-Star game, I remember people were like, hey, wow. He's a first-round draft pick, so high expectations coming out of the Quebec Junior Hockey League, but that first half year, he really struggled.
Yeah, it was a tough spot for him. But I mean, obviously he figured it out, as we saw. AHL MVP, clearly the MVP of the Texas Stars last year as well. Just an excellent player, who just needed a little bit of time. And it takes different amounts of time for everyone. Sometimes you never figure it out, and you don't get to that next level. And sometimes it takes half a year, a full year, 2 years, something like that. But Dallas has shown a patience to develop these things. They have confidence in their scouting abilities, especially with a lot of the excellent draft picks that they've been hitting on recently. They know that these things sometimes take time. Not everybody's going to be a Wyatt Johnston, right? Not everybody's going to be that where you can jump in from the get go. Just going to have patience, and that's why the Texas Stars exist.
For this next question, Stephen, you get to play Pete DeBoer. You ready?
All right.
I can't, unfortunately, give you DeBoer's salary, but
Well, that'd be nice.
yeah, it certainly would for both of us. So you saw probably more than anybody the development of Mavrik, Bourque, and Stankoven together as 2/3 of a line. And then Stankoven gets called up. Mavrik Bourque continued being hot even after the Stankoven departure from Cedar Park. If you were Pete DeBoer, would you reunite this pair to see if that chemistry still exists?
Yeah, I ran the numbers. So Texas, if you're not as familiar with Texas, they had a really hot first half of the year last year, and then they kind of trailed off in the back half of the year. They were number one with a bullet at New Year's break, and then they fell down and were in the play-in for the playoffs. And so I kind of broke down the numbers. Based on after July or after January 1st. So Bourque with Stankoven up until Stankoven got called up, he had 17 points in 18 games, 4 goals, 13 assists. Bourque without Stankoven, 24 games played, 22 points, 9 goals, 13 assists. So almost exactly similar point per game numbers. However, I don't think it hurts to give it a go. You've got established chemistry. The two know each other, and I think if you put an established veteran as their third, just like they did in Texas with Curtis McKenzie as their third, I think that is you look for advantages anywhere you can get them in the NHL. It's a game of inches and micro inches sometimes, right? And you want to take every advantage that you can. If you have a working pair that has chemistry, you're going to give it a go. Certainly it'll happen in the preseason, and hopefully it carries through all the way into the full regular season, because I know from getting to watch it up close, it's just a heck of a lot of fun to watch the two of them playing with each other. And I hope Dallas Stars fans get to see it inside the American Airlines Center.
A lot of people, when the fourth line was kind of being constructed after some losses due to free agency and the Foxa trade, a lot of people mentioned, what about Blümel on the fourth line? Matěj Blümel, the Czechoslovakian player, has been with the Texas Stars going on his third year, increased in points last year. What are your thoughts on the player heading into training camp?
Well, it's excellent for him because he had such a breakout year this year, which is strange. It feels like, again, another one of those players. I feel like he's been here forever.
Yeah.
Time is weird with the pandemic and those sorts of things, and how time sort of expanded during that time. But he was an AHL All-Star this year. I thought for sure, of course, Bourque and Stankoven were going to get recognized, but he also got selected. He had an excellent season, and Dallas was able to bring him back on, a RFA contract. And I think he's a player who, um, what I don't know about him is if he can play that bottom six role and be successful. He's always sort of had like a middle six type of role or top six type of role in Texas. He's a shooter, he's a scorer, those sorts of capabilities. This is where a lot of really strong AHL players fall down. Their role changes when they move from the AHL to the NHL. And longtime fans will remember Travis Morin. Travis Morin is a player who
Sure.
he's going to be, I would argue, he should be an AHL Hall of Famer. His number is retired by the Texas Stars. He's one of the assistant coaches here. He should be, enshrined in all these ways, but he could never make the transition to Dallas, partly because his role in Texas is different than his role was in Dallas. They weren't going to give him a power play role next to Tyler Seguin. He was going to be grinding it out on the third or fourth line. And that wasn't his game. And so he wasn't able to make that transition. And so it's really interesting. If you're not going to immediately be elevated to that top six, how can you muck it out in the third and fourth lines, play penalty killing, play, a utility role in order to make your case to be elevated further in the lineup? That is one of the main challenges that a lot of these players that we talk about have a challenge with.
Chase Wheatcroft going into his second year with Texas. Nice size, 6'2". What are your thoughts as he starts to develop?
Wheatcroft was in and out of the lineup. I think he played just over half of the season in terms of being into games. I think he's got a good shooting touch when he gets a chance. He had a couple games where just you could see he was feeling it, and I remember there were a couple where he scored and just he was in and around the net the entire game. And he needs to have more of that consistency, be more in those games and have more games like that. But I think, coming in and out of the lineup, when you can have play a game, where you play 70 games, 70, 72 games, something like that. I compare Wheatcroft, I was thinking earlier, to Matthew Seminoff, where Matthew Seminoff,
Yeah,
there was a lot of opportunities for him to maybe come out of the lineup, similar to Wheatcroft. And Seminoff never came out of the lineup because he had something extra. He was a responsible center. He played that fourth line role really well for the Texas Stars. He played 70 games in a season where
right.
he was a rookie. So I think, that's the sort of thing you want, that consistency, and you want to be tapped on the shoulder by your coach for almost every game. And I think that's what he needs in this next season.
I feel as though you brought up a great point in the added pressure and eyes for quick development for a first and second round pick. Poor Matthew Seminoff got kind of caught up in the Logan Stankoven because they were teammates in juniors and kind of got caught up in the hype where there were sit downs where it was both Seminoff and Stankoven sitting down. So I just felt as though when he got the call and was playing in Texas that people were kind of expecting like, okay, we're going to see some like a little bit of Logan Stankoven in him, right?
Exactly. And again, pressure from family names, from first round draft picks, from teams you're coming from, championship caliber,
Yep.
all those sorts of things can be coming from anywhere. And what I liked when I talked to him late in the year, last year for the American Hockey League website, and he had, I think, a really healthy mindset about what he needed to do and accomplish for himself in his rookie year. He wanted to be a guy who could play in different scenarios and be trusted late in the game. That was what he told me. Is he wanted to play in different scenarios, be trusted late in the game, which is exactly the sort of thing that you want to do if you want to make the step to the next level and be in that role where they could call on you to be a bottom six player. But I mean, talk about the kid was super malleable. At the point that I wrote the story, he had 12 different line mates throughout the course of the season, and just continue to roll, continue to be successful, to be trusted. So it's a testament to what he was able to do amid a lot of change. And I think that I'm really excited to see. I know he may not be on the radar of everyone, but I'm excited to see what he's able to do this coming season because he was thrown a lot in his first year. Hopefully things will be a little bit less crazy in year 2, and he'll be able to even further establish himself.
Let's quickly talk about the net minding for the Texas Stars and how it affects the Dallas Stars. And the Stars signed Magnus Hellberg. And I wanted to know from your perspective how you think that's going to affect the development of Rémi Poirier, Matt Murray out in Texas. And Hellberg has played 26 games in the NHL, various teams, big goalie at 6'6". This is just a depth signing, I'm assuming, obviously with Casey DeSmith and Jake Ottinger. But I thought it was interesting as well. To me, Rémi Poirier would get the top reps, right?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing that's happened over the past, I mean, it's been happening forever, but the 15 years where I've been covering the Texas Stars, the decision of how you man the net and what level of experience you want between the two guys that you call on a nightly basis. You look back to, when Texas had Landon Bowe, who was a
Yep.
prospect for them, and Mike McKenna, a journeyman who'd been everywhere in the league and was just a trusted, known quantity. And that was the model for a really long time. Where you have a trusted journeyman goaltender. I could think, I could name a dozen right off the top of my head of guys who were that trusted third guy who could get called up to Dallas if needed, but mostly were there to mentor and grow that other goaltender who was going to be the goalie of the future. And then there was a slight period here where Dallas had gone away from that, and they had signed more younger pairings. Like last year, for example, we had Matt Murray and we had Rémi Poirier, two players who, Matt Murray is 25, 26, and Poirier is 22. Magnus Hellberg's 33. He's
Yeah.
been around. He's done this before. And I think that this is a shift to having that trusted third guy because Dallas is in a spot where they don't want Jake Ottinger's health or Casey DeSmith's health for that matter to put them in a situation where they are relying on an untested Rémi Poirier to start NHL games when they're in the thick of their season. That's not to say that Poirier can't be the player who pushes his way up and makes himself the third goaltender, but Hellberg is your insurance policy. He's saying, if break glass in case of emergency, call up Magnus Hellberg. He will be your third goaltender. And Rémi Poirier can continue to play down here with Ben Cross or Brian Thompson or whoever else might be the backup here called up from Idaho. That, I think, is why the signing happened. And the fact that they didn't feel comfortable additionally with, let's say Hellberg does get called up, you got to think about what the Texas Stars are thinking about. They would be left with, if Poirier got called up and they didn't have Hellberg, they would have two goaltenders who are on AHL contracts and no one on an NHL contract in Texas. And so you kind of want to think about that depth and roster management and having somebody who has that next level ceiling if in case that happens. And you hope no injuries happen, but you have to plan as if everybody's gonna get injured.
With development, there's still the room and the atmosphere and leadership within the room. And every time I talk about the Texas Stars, and you've spent a lot of time with this player, I try to mention Curtis McKenzie a lot. Could probably go overseas and make a lot more money. Has spent a number of years with Texas. What has he meant to this organization?
I don't even know where to start with that question, to be honest. He's played his, bookended his career, I would say, with the Texas Stars. He started there in 2013, won the Rookie of the Year, won the Calder Cup there, eventually left as captain in his first stint, and then made his way back on an AHL contract. He's now signed two-year AHL contracts, which are still vanishingly rare in the American Hockey League. He wrote the foreword to the book that you mentioned at the top there, We Win Here, and if I haven't told the story before, and if I have, apologies if you heard it. It's just such a great one. Usually the way these forwards work, to give you a little behind the scenes, you go and you interview a person, and then you ghostwrite something, right? And that's the way it works generally. And surprise, surprise, Michael Jordan isn't writing the foreword himself to some book about the Chicago Bulls dynasty in the 90s. He gets interviewed, and then somebody ghostwrites it for him. I did the same thing for Curtis McKenzie at first. I interviewed him, and then I wrote him something, and I sent it to him. And he said, I don't know, this doesn't say enough. And he completely rewrote the thing. He and his wife sat down and wrote what you read in this opening of that book. And the level of love and care and the importance that they put on this team, the family atmosphere that they built around the team themselves, because he's part of the leadership group. He is the captain, an undisputed leader in that locker room. It came through on the page. And I remember it was, we were working late trying to hit a deadline for the book, and Sean and I, it's 1 in the morning, and I'm sitting in the pantry trying not to wake up the kids, and we're reading this thing, just softly whispering like, holy expletive, I can't believe the way that he's writing about this team and the level of artistry he has and care he has for the team. And I think the fans give that back to him. It's incredible the way that they also give that back to him. Whenever he retires, whenever that happens, I don't think there's any question that his number should go up, and that he should have a long career that goes beyond his playing time, that extends into the rafters.
And it's not like this guy is playing fourth line minutes in Texas. He was on a line for a good chunk of the year with Stankoven and Bourque.
Absolutely, and he is part of the reason why they've matured to where they are. And that's the thing, is he may not be on an NHL contract, but he is an important part of what they are doing at the NHL level. And this is part of why it's so important. I think I hope that they'll continue to do it. I imagine they will. But when we see the rosters come out for training camp in a few weeks, you'll probably see Curtis McKenzie's name on there. He's not going to play a game with the Dallas Stars this year, but it's important that he's part of the story of the Dallas Stars from day one, and that means making him part of the training camp roster for the Dallas Stars on a PTO. He scored a goal or two in that preseason game they played last year. I was super happy to be able to put him among the 3 stars for that game. It was a really cool thing to be able to do in that building when they played Arizona last year. And what he's meant to this franchise, it doesn't just sit within this building in Cedar Park. It extends to right up to Victory Park and what they do in the American Airlines Center, because he's part of the story that they're going to tell this season, even if he doesn't lace it up for a single game.
You have Texas Stars names that you hear a lot about that are now coaches: Max Fortunas, Travis Morin. Has Curtis ever talked about, after playing, possibly getting into coaching?
I haven't talked to him about that yet. I don't know what he wants to do next. He's got young kids, and he's got his family back in BC and those sorts of things. So who knows if he wants to where he wants to go next. But to be honest, I thought the same thing about Travis Moore, and I wasn't sure what he wanted to do next, and he jumped right into coaching pretty quickly. So it's definitely it could be a possibility. There's a lot of roles out there for hockey players, scouting and those sorts of things as well. I had a great opportunity myself to run into a former Texas Star, Sean Backman, at the Stanley Cup final when he was scouting for Florida in case Dallas ended up playing against Florida in the final. And just the experience that he's had of being a scout has been pretty cool. And so that's also a possibility. But uh, hockey players don't want to talk about this stuff because they live in the here and now,
Yeah.
right? It's all about the next shift.
Is there a player that I haven't mentioned that you think actually, okay, they might show a little bit something in training camp and, elevate themselves as far as a prospect or a player in Texas this year that we should kind of keep an eye on?
I'm interested in some of these guys who came in on UFA deals. I always am, because you never know what they're going to find out there. Guys like Luke Chris on D, he came in and played toward the end of the season after finishing up his career before, and I'm blanking on whether he was in major, junior, or college, but he finished up his career and came in on an ATO, so in the American Hockey League, you can have amateur tryouts. You can basically finish out the season with a professional team, which is pretty cool. And so he got a full contract from Dallas. I'm interested to see what he's able to do with a full year and a full development and training camp. Another guy, Justin Ritzkovian, is a player who, at one point, he was the only true center on the Texas Stars because of the injuries and call-ups that they had, and he had great face-off numbers, excellent, just defensive prowess and those sorts of things. I think he's a player who also fits that mold as a center. And then another player that I feel like has again been around for such a long time, Oskar Bäck.
Yeah.
I think he's a player who you ask about Matěj Blümel and whether Matěj Blümel can make it to the NHL and can he play that role. Oskar Bäck's a player who could be elevated and easily play that fourth line role, that third line role, plug in, defensively responsible. He's one of those players that you send over the boards to win the faceoff on the power play and then bring him right back. Like
Yeah.
he's that kind of player. And so I think that's the kind of player that you would need in that bottom six role. And so I'm interested to see if he can make that jump for even a few games this season for Dallas.
I'm also interested. Jim Nill said that he wouldn't be here forever, although hasn't really talked about, when he'll be leaving, doing such a great job. And the scouting of the Dallas Stars as of recent has been unbelievable. And that's why we're seeing so many prospects come. But the name that I wanted you to mention just real quick is your relationship with Scott White. And then we had a chance to talk with Rich Peverley this year, and I was so impressed with what Rich has done in the organization.
It's pretty impressive. The way that Scott White's the only GM that the Texas Stars have ever had. He came in on day one and hasn't gone anywhere since. And he's gotten elevated to the AGM role in Dallas. He doesn't live here in Cedar Park anymore. He lives up in the Frisco area. But I think he will be an NHL GM at some point. I don't know if he'll be the Dallas Stars GM. I personally would love that from a relationship standpoint and a history standpoint. I think he understands what this team wants to do and how this organization wants to be run. I think he's done a lot of maturing as a GM, working with the media, working those relationships. I know I've noticed it where he's building the skills that are required to be an NHL GM over the past 15 years, as we all are building the skills to go to whatever the next level is. And that's the nice thing about the AHL. The AHL is just such a development league for everyone. And same goes with folks like Rich Peverley, folks who are, there's goalie coaches, there's, equipment managers and the athletic trainers, the number of folks who have had an address in the Cedar Park area and eventually changed it to be in Frisco from the Texas Stars is just incredible. And that's what you want from an organization like this, is to continue to grow at all levels. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention and throw a shout out for Sage Kamasi, who's a guy who ran the press box here in Texas for a couple years, and now he's going to be doing the same thing up in Dallas. So at all levels, there is growth and maturation that happens at the American Hockey League.
He is a fountain of information, Spits and Suds listeners. Please follow him on hockey at 100 Degree Hockey, and it's worth buying a copy. The only book about the Texas Stars, We Win Here, and you can purchase the book, wewinhere.com, to massive Spits and Suds contributor, Stephen Meserve, along with the guy we speak to every week, our NHL insider, Sean Shapiro. Must have been fun with you guys teaming up for that project. So everyone, please go buy a book. That's really important. You are a beast, sir. Always appreciate all the information you get to us. Always appreciate you coming on the program and delivering this kind of information to Dallas Stars fans as they prepare for training camp.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll see everyone at an actual hockey rink very soon.
Absolutely, and that's going to do it for another edition of Spits and Suds. As we started this program today, we got some very, very sad news. One of our great listeners to the fan, Kenny in Quinlan, passed away. Kenny was very popular at events, went by the name Kenny Quinlan, and always took the time to mention his grandsons, Landon and Maxim, who are playing in the Dallas Stars youth organization. So a stick tap on behalf of all of us at the fan and Spits and Suds to Landon and Maxim for their hockey careers. We'll be cheering you on. And huge hockey fan now up in heaven in Kenny from Quinlan. We're going to miss you, buddy. Until next time on Spits and Suds, have a great day, everyone.